Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, back with another video, and this time it is my 2021 LPL Spring Split preseason predictions here. This was a very requested video in the comment section, this and the LCK video, which I am working on, but obviously LPL starting up in a couple of days. For brevity, I am recording this on the 6th of January 2021, so if anything crazy happens in the next day and a half before the top esports and Suning game kicks off, I apologize. I'm probably not going to be remaking this video, but I was really excited to get this one out. I've watched Demacia Cup twice over now to make sure that I've prepared for this video. By the way, if you haven't checked out Demacia Cup, please go check out Demacia Cup. It was a very fun tournament, a lot of surprises. I'm not going to spoil who makes it to the finals, but a team that I don't think a lot of people would have expected ended up making the finals. But I'm very excited to talk about the LPL here today, probably the most exciting and action-packed region that we have in the world, not counting some of the minor regions. I know there are some leagues out there that can be pretty bloodthirsty, but in terms of major regions, I don't think it gets any more bloodthirsty or more aggressive than the LPL. And so the format of this, if you're not familiar with my videos, is I'm going to go down every single team, all 17, I know, that's a lot, 17 LPL teams, going over their current roster, how I feel it's going to do, as well as my prediction for them, what place I believe they're going to finish. Now, I'm going to do this in order of how they finished in the summer split, including playoffs. So playoff results for the top teams, and then just the regular results for the others. So if you guys are excited for this, please go ahead and leave a like, leave a comment, let me know you guys' opinion. Obviously, I don't assume that your opinion is going to exactly match mine, so I'm happy to see all these different opinions. I love chatting it up with you people in the comment section. So if you have different opinions, maybe you're higher on some teams or lower on some teams than I am, please go ahead and leave that in the description below, or the comment section rather, and I'd be happy to chat it up with you. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's jump into our first team, the first place team, the number one seed from the LPL in 2020, and that was Top Esports, of course. Now, Top Esports not making a ton of moves, of course, because this roster is stacked as it is, but they do make one of relative notes. So your lineup is going to be looking like 369 in the top lane, Karsa in the jungle, Knight in the mid lane, Jackie Love at 80 carry, and then Zuo at support. Now, Zuo is a relative, or Zuo, however you want to say it, is a relative unknown, has yet to play a single game in the LPL, was on the World Elite LDL team last year, I believe, all of last year, maybe even longer than that. So this is a massive decision for Top Esports to, Yuyanja really wasn't that good, and I think they were aware of that, and they knew that was an area that they did have to upgrade in. But for them to bring in, for the best team in a region to be looking to win a world championship and to bring in a relative unknown at a position like support is very uncommon. It's something you don't often see. I don't know what to say. Zuo looked really good at Demacia Cup. His synergy with Jackie Love was incredible. Their laning phase, in particular, looked incredibly good. Now, if that can keep up, if Zuo can be that missing piece to this Top Esports team, that's incredible, because this team has talent out the ass. Oh, I should probably explain. You guys on the screen right now are seeing the lineup as well as some numbers. In the top left corner, you're going to see where I personally power rank each team. So in this case for Top Esports, I have them personally power ranked first overall. I have them as the best team in the LPL. And I also actually polled quite a few people in a Discord server that I'm a part of to give me some of their power rankings. And I went ahead and made an aggregate for that in the top right corner, just to give a different opinion, maybe a more consensus, a more public opinion as to what people are expecting. So you'll notice they are going to differ sometimes. In this case, they do. I have Top Esports first. The consensus had them on average second. So just something to point out there. Also, you're going to see all the players for each team on screen with a little number next to them. That is going to indicate where I rank them in terms of their position. So you'll see Knight in the middle of your screen right there. It says Knight and then a little 1. I have him ranked as the number 1 mid laner in the LPL. Now, that is completely position dependent. You're going to see some players, some positions that may be a little less stacked are going to have some players that would be in the top 10 that you wouldn't expect, and some players that might fall out of the top 10 in positions like mid lane that are incredibly deep in the LPL. So just keep that in mind. But yes, I have this team power ranked first Personally, I think they have to be the favorites going in for me. I think Knight is the best player in the world when everything is going right, when meta allows. I think when we're talking about a Worlds disappointment, I don't think top 4 at Worlds is quite a disappointment, but this was a team that was very much expected to win the World Championships. They weren't able to perform. I don't want to entirely chalk it up to a bad meta, but of course Karsa is that more supportive style jungler with the really aggressive lanes with 369. You have Knight, who's very control-oriented, and Jackie Love, all who like to play with assistance. And unfortunately, fortunately for other teams, I guess, it was a much more carry-oriented jungle meta at the World Championships. I don't think that necessarily fit top esports exactly how they wanted it to. They made it work because they're such good players, but I don't think it was necessarily the style they would have dreamed of playing at the tournament. So, I'm expecting a bounce-back season for them. I expect them to be at the top, if not the top of the LPL. This is absolutely a team to watch out for in 2021. Next up, we have your runners-up in the 2020 summer split in the LPL, and that's going to be LGD Gaming, your 2020 spring split champions, who would have been the MSI representatives last year. Now, LGD Gaming really was disappointing at Worlds. However, this roster, if you're ever going to call it, I don't want to say an upgrade, but because, the lineup you're looking at on your screen right now is the exact same. However, they actually went and picked up, I guess I should read off the roster. In the top lane, you have Zoom. In the jungle is Kanavi. Mid lane, Yagao. AD carry is Loken. And support is Lu Mao. But I should note, they did also go ahead and pick up GA in the mid lane, and then Mystic, a little Team WE reunion here, as backups and subs for the mid lane and AD carry role, just in case they needed cover. Now, this team, just like it was last year on paper, is incredibly strong. Probably the strongest team in the region. That's probably why the consensus has them ranked at number 1, while I have them at number 2. It's not necessarily because I don't think that this team is as good as top esports. I just am worried about some of the consistency. Mostly, I think when you're looking at the weakest players on both teams, I would say, obviously Zhuo is a question. Outside of Zhuo, you have no weak players on top esports. 369 is a great laner. Kars is one of the best junglers in the world. Knight is maybe the best player in the world. Jackie Love is maybe the best AD carry in the world. And on this team, you have a few more question marks, most notably in your 2 carry roles in Yagao and Loken. I'm just not super sold on them as elite level world players. I don't think that they proved that at the World Championship this year. I'm going to need to see a lot out of them for me to put them as the best team in the LPL. That's not to take away from the absolute superstars that are on this roster, though. Players like Zoom, Kanavi, Lu Mao. Zoom actually played really well at the World Championships. It was a very favorable meta for top laners. He did really well. He did his best to carry this team. Him and Lu Mao actually played, I thought, really well at the World Championships. Kanavi didn't have a great World Championship. I'm not going to hold that against him too much, although I think it was a meta that was, kind of right up his alley, and it is slightly concerning to see him not be able to perform. But I'm not going to hold one tournament against, a full year of him being arguably the best jungler in the entire world, against him. So, I have this team ranked second. I think that they are absolutely a contender for the World Championship, not to mention the LPL Finals. I would love to see a rematch between this top esports team and this LGD Gaming team. It'll be interesting to see if that GA and Mystic duo end up making a difference for this team. I'd love to see it if they could, but they're pretty much a cut above everyone else in the next tier. These 2 teams are. That's going to take us to the team that finished 3rd place in the 2020 LPL Summers split, as well as 2nd place at the 2020 World Championships, your World's runners-up, and that's going to be Suning. Now, Suning looked really, really, really good at Worlds. Probably the best they had looked all year up until that point. Their lineup is very, very similar with one major change. It's going to be consisting of Bin in the top lane, SFM, SOFM, however you say it, in the jungle, Angel in mid lane, Huanfeng at AD carry, and then On, or formerly OO, at support. Now, this is a very interesting change. Of course, Sword Art, the former support, shot caller, leader, mentor, whatever you want to call him for this team, does take the big lucrative deal to go to TSM in North America. And they do replace him with a very young player, an unproven LPL player in On here. He didn't look unbelievable. He didn't look bad at Demacia Cup. He just looked average. This team looked average without Huan Feng. Huan Feng is on the list here because I believe him to be back for the season, or at least for a little bit of the season. If he's not, I think that very much changes the direction of this team, as I do think he's probably the best carry that they have. Not to say that they don't have great carries across the board, but I think he really adds a layer to this team that a lot of people, that I think is needed. Your top side of the map is so incredibly strong. You have been in SOFM. SOFM especially had a fantastic world championship, proved that he was an elite caliber jungler and one of the best in the entire world. Bin, for his credit, had a great world championship as well. A better group stage, I'd say, than a bracket stage. But even so, he was good enough in the bracket to help his team propel to world finals. So there's that. I think if you're looking for reasons to be a little more low on this team, like I think a lot of people have been, you can recognize that maybe in the power rankings. Me and the consensus actually agree here. We both have them 5th in the power rankings, and I'll actually show a list of all of the power rankings for both me and the consensus at the end of this video, just so there is a visual reference so you guys can actually see the power rankings in a visual way. But I think if you were going to have some reservations with this team, it's going to fall onto Angel. I get a lot of flack because I don't think Angel is that spectacular. I don't think he's a bad player, and I definitely think you can win with Angel, as was proven. But I think in a league that is very, very good in terms of mid laners, I think it's the strongest mid lane league, maybe barring the LCK, but you could argue LPL is deeper in the world. I think it's just really tough for someone like Angel, who's, just that more consistent type in the mid lane, to stand out. I think I don't want to say he could hold them back, but he's not necessarily going to be generating leads against people like Knight or people like, we'll get to Rookie and, all them later, but mid lane is just so stacked, and if you want to be a top team, you have to make sure that you have that position on lock, and I'm not sure Angel is that guy. I talked a little bit. I don't want to get into any of the out of the game drama with Huan Feng. It's just not something I want to cover on this channel. But if that bot lane is complete and intact, Huan Feng was arguably the best AD carry at the World Championship. Him and Ruler and Jackie Love could all make that case, but you could argue that he was the best AD carry at the best tournament in the world. And if that's true, and you're bringing in a rookie support, you have a lot of high hopes that they can mesh. Of course, I assume they played together on OO coming from the Suning LDL team, so I imagine they've had at least a little bit of experience together in the same building. But this was a team that really overperformed at the World Championships, and I think we're going to see some necessary and expected regression from them coming this season. That brings us to our final Worlds team from the LPL in 2020, and that is going to be LGD Gaming. Now, this is a team that, for all intents and purposes, really blew it up this offseason. They weren't able to retain hardly any of their talent. Longxing's gone, Jie's gone, Peanut's gone, Mark is gone. This entire, the only piece that is remaining from this team that went to the World Championship last year is Kramer, who you could probably argue was the worst performing member of that roster last year. I don't have a ton of high hopes for this roster. A lot of the players that they did end up replacing their kind of known quantities with are big question marks. You have some guys who have barely ever played, like Colt or Garvey. I don't really know who's starting in the top lane. I have Colt there now because he played in Demacia Cup, but I'm really not sure who their top laner is going to be. And then you have, relative rookies. You have people like Flora. You have people like Peace. I should probably go down the roster. It's going to be Colt in the top lane, Flora in the jungle, Uniboy at mid, Kramer at AD carry, and then Peace at support. Flora and Peace obviously never played in the LPL, coming straight from the LDL. Flora from LGD's team, and then Peace from Joy Dream. But I don't see how I can have any high expectations for this roster. You're replacing Jie with Uniboy, and while I think Uniboy is probably a little bit underrated in terms of how he's being viewed this offseason, he had a really good year with AHQ, and then actually had a very solid performance with, at Worlds. So I can't take it away from him. He was playing with a team he had never played with before. So, it's impressive to see what he was able to do. PSG Talon was kind of a thrown together roster, but, I think he's a little underrated. I don't think he's as good as Jie. I think he's got, high shoes to fill. And I don't think that duo you're kind of relying on Uniboy and Kramer to be the solidifying force of this team full of rookies that, honestly can't really carry that well. And I don't see this team performing all that well. I see this as a major drop-off. I see this, honestly, as one of the worst teams in the LPL this upcoming split, which is crazy to think because they were obviously a Worlds team last year. But me and the consensus both agree we have this team 14th out of 17th. That is very out of the playoffs. I think this team, this is probably the highest I can afford to put this team. I'm not sure I'm willing to go above like 13 or 12. This team could be 17. Everything could implode. This could not work at all. We just really don't know with LGD. However, if you're going to look for upside, a lot of their players are very young. Colt, Floor, and Peace obviously have a lot of room to grow. We've seen players come in from the PCS or the LMS or whatever you want to call it before Uniboy, players like Fofo, players like Maple, Karsa, that have been able to make an impact immediately. And if Uniboy can be one of those players, I think the prospects of this team does go up a little bit. However, I'm not sure even that makes them a playoff team. Either way, I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do after this split, see how their young players develop, and see what direction they go in for the future. That brings us to one of the most, if not the most, polarizing teams in the entire world. I am talking about, of course, Invictus Gaming, who narrowly missed out on the World Championships last year, losing that series to LGD when they had absolutely no right to. Their lineup from top to support is the Shy in the top lane. I currently have Zune there at the jungle, Rookie in the mid lane, Wink at AD carry, and Baolan at support. So much is going on with this team. I'll talk about the jungle situation first. Of course, Ning is on roster. However, as usual, IG have their IG Young jungler starting over him at the beginning of the year. They did the same thing last year. I think they're going to do the same thing until the end of time. So Ning is currently not in the lineup, so I don't currently have him listed here. I think Ning obviously raises the ceiling of this team a lot. Ning is a world-class jungler, and he obviously raises the expectation here a lot as well. But even with a rookie jungler in here, I think you have plenty of talent to make that work out. We talked about the Shy in the top lane. If he can just put it together, we've seen what happens when he can put it together. He was one of the best players of the 2018 World Championship run that this Invictus Gaming team had that year. He just has not been consistent. He has had games that he has absolutely dominated, and he's had just as many games where he is completely into, particularly in important games like playoff games and then later Worlds qualifiers. So if he can just get it together, he's arguably the number one top laner in the entire world in terms of mechanics. So, if you could put those pieces together, you'd really like to. Mentioning, one of the best players in the world, you do have probably the most consistent player in the entire world, and that's Rookie in the mid lane. He has just been the best for so many years. People are going to talk about how 2020 was a down year for him. I don't agree with that. I think he had one of his best years in 2020. I think this team just wasn't able to back him up in the way that they needed to in the playoffs. Look at the regular season for that. And even in the playoffs, he was still spectacular. He's still one of the top 5 players in the world, in my opinion, and a true class player that is going to carry any team he's on. The only thing you worry about with Rookie here is that he's going to have to carry every single game, which obviously he can do. We showed that, a little bit last year, but if you really want to be a world-class team in one of the best leagues in the entire world, you're going to need more than just one player carrying your entire roster. So that brings us to the bot lane with Wink and Baolan. Puff was quite a weakness for IG last year, and it seems like they identified that. A lot of people were really high on Puff. I was not one of them. I didn't think that bot lane worked quite at all. Luckily enough, they actually go out and get Wink, who was on eStar last year, who actually I thought was fantastic in spring. I thought he was one of the best AD carries in the entire spring split. He pushed that team into playoffs. Don't forget, eStar was a playoff team in the spring. And I really think this could be, I don't want to say the missing piece, but I think he is an incredibly talented player that I think covers a lot of what Rookie and the Shy do. I don't want to say poorly, but he is an incredible late-game team fighter that is going to scale up, and he's going to get there. Baolan, obviously, one of the most consistent supports in the world. He's been very good for 2 or 3 straight years now. If this bot lane manages to gel, I truly believe that this team could be incredibly dangerous. You'll notice from the power rankings, I have them a little bit higher than maybe the consensus does. I have them power ranked at 4th. I just believe in the talent of this team. There's way too much mechanical skill in terms of the Shy, Rookie, Wink, Baolan. If they get Ning back, I mean, that is such an unbelievable 5 that they are putting out there that it would be a travesty if they did not make the World Championships. However, I said that last year as well. The consensus seems to be a little bit lower, maybe a little bit more worried about those inconsistencies, those playoff woes that we have seen from some of these players. But, you know, if they can figure that out, I think this team has as much talent as anyone in the entire world. That brings us to our feel-good team of 2020, maybe in the entire world, but definitely here in the LPL, and that's going to be Victory 5. This was a team that finished 0-16, a 1-32 game record in spring. I mean, that is unbelievable. They played 33 games. They won 1 of them. And they followed that up by making playoffs in summer and narrowly missing out on the World Championships. This is, and you could argue that this roster only got better in the offseason. Their lineup right now is Longxing in the top lane, Weiwei in the jungle, Mole in the mid lane, Y4 AD carry, and then our Lord and Savior, PP God, at support. By the way, side note here, if you're on Reddit and you're not subscribed to the, if you don't follow the Church of PP God Reddit, what are you doing with your life? You got to jump in there. It's the best. Anyways, back on track. This team really showed up in summer. Mole, obviously the only returning member from that spring team, but this they surprised a lot of people. Weiwei, had an insane 2020 summer, and PP God as well. Those 2 players especially looked like 2 of the best players in the entire world last year. You go ahead and bring in Longxing from that LGD Worlds team, and you're looking at that's a flat upgrade. I think, in my opinion. I'm not, we'll talk about BBU in a minute, but Longxing is, I think, a straight upgrade. And I think that it only really raises the ceiling of what this team is able to accomplish. You are also replacing Sam D with Y4. However, they're essential. I don't want to say they're the same player because Sam D is a good player, but they are the same, similar, that facilitating, that more passive AD carry style that, PP God can go and roam with Weiwei. It can team up to go help Mole in the mid lane or even make some plays with Rift Herald and Longxing in the top lane. This team really does have a lot of options with what they want to do. I definitely think this roster only got better, which makes it a shame for me to put them down. I just think that the LPL got better as a whole. I think there's going to be teams that I expect to be a lot more consistent this year. I have them personally powering 6th. That's right below Suning. In retrospect, this team might be better than Suning. I think it's just hard for me to not put Suning up there. However, the consensus seems to have them ranked 4th. The consensus has this as a Worlds team with, I guess maybe not a Worlds team because we don't know how MSI is going to play out, but, they have them as a very, 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 very strong, if not a Worlds team, right on the cusp. So, I can't really argue with that. If this team did end up making the World Championships, I would be incredibly happy because I love Victory 5, and I wouldn't be that surprised. However, I don't know if I'm actively going to go out and predict that. I still think this roster has a little bit of a ceiling. It's kind of what I was saying all of last year. I'm really not sure that this is a team that you can really expect to be on the same level as a team like Top Esports or JD Gaming. But, to put them up there with a team like Invictus, who I think on any given day they could absolutely beat, or even a team like Suning, I think they could absolutely beat on any given day. And for that, I think, you got to give them props. And I think they, like I said, they only upgraded this offseason. Moving on from the feel-good story of last year to what is potentially the feel-good story of this year, and that is Team WE. Now, I said I wasn't going to spoil Demacia Cup, and I'm not going to without a warning, so I'm going to give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1 to get out of here. And now I'm going to say it. Team WE, surprisingly, or shocking to a lot of people, actually made the finals of Demacia Cup, which I think it shocked a lot of people, but I'm not really sure it should have. They made a ton of upgrades in a lot of important positions, so let's go ahead and talk about that. Their lineup now is looking like Breathe in the top lane, of course, formerly Curse on OMG. Beishang in the jungle, Shanks in the mid lane, Zhomong at AD carry, and then Missing at support. Now, this team looks incredibly good on paper. I think you're talking about Breathe as one of the most underrated players in the entire LPL last year. He was on a terrible OMG team that just could not get anything done. He was trying his absolute best to 1v9 those games, and he just could not do it. You're talking about Beishang, who was, one of the top 3 to 4 junglers in the entire region last year. Missing, who was one of the top 3 to 4 supports in the entire region last year. Zhou Meng, who was, surprisingly, he was terrible, I thought, in spring. But he actually really turned it around, had a really good summer split, caused his team to get into playoffs. I think the only question mark that you have with this roster is Shanks in the mid lane. Now, for me personally, that's a pretty big question mark. He looked okay at Demacia Cup. He did not look good in lane. He did not look good in the 1v1 environments. He looked fine when he was kind of playing with a bunch of really, really good players in team fights. And your hope, if you're a WE fan, is just he won't hold the team back too much. But if you're talking about a ceiling for this team, I think the ceiling for this team could be as high as something like, 3rd or 4th in the entire league. I think we could see WE going to Worlds. We could really, if everything progresses, you have 3 of the best players in the entire region, or you have 2 of the best players in the entire region, and then 2 players that I expect to surprise a lot of people with their performances in Breathe and Zhou Meng. So, I like this roster. I really, 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 really like what WE did in the offseason. I think consistency is going to be a big thing for this team. If they can consistently beat up on the people that are supposed to be below them in the power rankings, I think we're going to see them climb the ladder. I think that is kind of notoriously what we've seen in the LPL is the teams that can consistently beat those lower level teams and not drop games randomly are the ones that we end up seeing. The consistency, is important at the top. So, I think as long as, I don't want to say Shanks is, a glaring hole, but I think he would be the only thing I think that could hold this team back from being one of the better teams in the entire region. However, if everything comes together, I could absolutely see them, contending for a championship. That brings us to our final playoff team from the 2020 summer split in the LPL, and that is going to be former world champions FunPlus Phoenix. Now, FunPlus Phoenix's roster from top to support is looking like new addition Nuguri in the top lane, Tion in the jungle, Doanby in the mid lane, LWX at AD carry, and then Crisp at support. Now, the ceiling for this team, I think, is out of the building. It's not only breaks the roof, it breaks the sky. We saw what this team could do when the meta and everything was aligning in their favor back in 2019. However, I think there are some pretty major question marks in terms of what happens when you're not in meta, which is kind of what we saw in summer of last year, where they looked like an average LPL team. You're adding a guy like Nuguri, who was arguably the best player in the entire world at the World Championships this year. It's a massive addition, but they did something very similar last year. Let's not forget when they did bring in Khan, and kind of funny how they swapped teams. But, we saw this last year as well. He won't be splitting time with Gimgoon. It's going to be his position entirely, which it should be. He is better than Gimgoon. But we have to see if this is a roster that can show they can play through that top side. That was a big question mark was, is this a roster that can play through top lane? Because they never really had to before, and they didn't really look that good when they were trying to do it last year. Of course, you're retaining all other 4 starting members. Big caveat here, I have Tion ranked 8th as the jungler. That is pretty low, and it's not as low as his skill is indicative of. Of course, he has those wrist issues that he suffered pretty much the entirety of last year with. I don't want to take that into account too much, but it is important to note that if those wrist issues do continue, that's probably more of his ceiling, as opposed to what used to be 1, 2, or 3 in the LPL. This team struggled a lot without an identity last year. The bot lane did not play well. I think that was a big reason why this team didn't have a lot of late game presence. LWX and Crisp, I have trouble saying his name, I don't know why, did not look good last year. I thought they were average at best. They weren't very flexible. Talking about flexibility, we praised a guy like Doanby for his flexibility for a long time, but I don't know if flexibility is the way to put it, because he does a couple things really, really well. And they're not the meta things. Granted to him, they're not the things that you would expect a mid laner to do really well. However, I'm not sure he's the kind of player that's going to be able to carry this roster if that needs to happen. I think that's why I like the Nuguri addition a little bit more. But, if this team got to a world championship in 2019 by playing through their jungle, having their mid laner roam, and then letting their bot lane scale, And that doesn't, if Tion's going to have the wrist issues, if he's not going to be able to be that carry anymore, they're going to have to figure out how to be flexible and how to do a new style. So I believe in them. I think the talent is absolutely there. Nuguri Doenby is one of the best two, solo lane combinations in the entire world. I'd have to do a list on what the best actually is, but that is absolutely up there. No questions asked. And if everything can click for this team, which I think me and the consensus seem to think is a little more likely than it was last year, this is a Worlds team. We both have them ranked third. That is a guaranteed Worlds team, I believe. Yeah, that's a guaranteed Worlds team for a major region. So, as long as this team can perform up to expectation, I don't even need players like LWX and Crisp to be superstars. They just need to not be the liabilities that they were last year. If Tion, and, obviously, like I said, if Tion gets those wrist issues figured out, if he, can come back and he's a lot healthier after having, all those months off, I think that could be a big game changer for this FPX team. But for now, I think they are just a tier under the best that we have in the LPL, but maybe at the top of that next tier with teams like Suning and teams like Victory 5 and Invictus Gaming. That brings us to fan favorites, Royal Never Give Up. Now, I believe, check me on this, but I'm pretty damn confident about it. I believe that summer was the first time that RNG actually missed playoffs ever. Now, that's a pretty big deal. Obviously, losing Uzi is a massive deal. He is arguably the second best player of all time. I think, the impact that he had on the game, on the region, on the role, everything is, we could talk about that for an entire video. But, him leaving this team really left a big hole that Betty was not able to fill. You bring in Gala now to try and fill it, but you look at this roster, which I have it listed here. This could be different, and I'll explain why in a minute, but we have Xiao Bei in the top lane, Wei in the jungle, Xiaohu in mid, Gala at AD carry, and then Ming at support. This is a little bit different than what they tried out at Demacia Cup. They actually had Xiaohu, their longtime superstar mid laner, in the top lane with, their young stud Cryan in the mid lane, which I'm going to say it. I think that roster has quite a bit more upside. I think Cryan's really good. I think you could make an argument that he is one of the top 10 mid laners in the entire region right now. And, obviously he's behind one of the best mid laners in the entire region. But if you could find a way to make that work, I think that would give you a little bit higher of a ceiling. The floor, I think, would be a little bit lower, though, obviously, with Xiao who's swapping to top lane. But talking about this team as it is, this team is very similar to last year, which I think is going to be disappointing to a lot of fans. What they really struggled with last year was direction, was decision-making, late-game ability. They really just felt lost. That was the word I used all year to describe them, was lost, because it just seemed like this team didn't have an identity. It didn't have a presence. And that's not something you can really afford to lack in a region as stacked as the LPL. You still have two of the best players in the region. Xiaohu and Ming are some of the most experienced. They both took a step back, for sure, last year. I may have them ranked a little too highly in the position rankings, but, I think the talent is still there, absolutely. If you can get the production out of the rest of the players, especially Gala. Gala showed a lot of potential, I think, last year, especially towards the end of last year. If he can just keep on that pace, if he can just keep getting better, I think we could be talking about him as one of the better AD carries come the end of this spring, even summer split. But it's hard for me to predict that even with that, the rest of the roster is going to fall into place. I have them personally power ranked at 12th, which may be criminally low. I could be very, very far off on this RNG team. I'm very well aware of that. They could very well be better than 12th. However, I feel like there's always one team that implodes every year, and this is probably the one that I would expect to underperform most. The consensus has them underperforming, but not by nearly as much. They have them 10th. So I am a little bit lower on this RNG team. I believe 12th would almost for sure be the lowest that they've ever been ranked before. So, hopefully it doesn't come to pass because, RNG's got one of the best fan bases in the world. They're one of the most historic and important organizations in the history of League of Legends, but I just don't have a lot of faith in this current construction of the roster. From one historic LPL organization to another, we are now talking about EDG Edward Gaming. who made some big splash moves this offseason. Let's go ahead and run down their roster. In the top lane is Flandre. In the jungle is Clear Love. Mid lane is Scout. AD carry is Viper. And support is Mako. Now, we'll get the big elephant out of the room. Clear Love, coming out of retirement, one of the most historic players in LPL and League of Legends history. I have him ranked maybe a little lower than you would expect, of course, with him being one of the most historically good players. It's just really hard for me to rank him any higher, considering we haven't seen him play in an entire year. That's not to say he can't come back and be fantastic. I think I'm taking more of a wait-and-see approach with this team, and with Clear Love especially. But I think if you're talking about a team that just has talent, that if they can put it together, that they're going to be dangerous, it's this one. You bring in Flandre from LNG. I'm an LNG supporter, by accident. I just ended up over-predicting them every single year. I'm always like, they're going to be good, and they're never good. So I de facto became a fan. But, Flandre is one of the players that I think I've enjoyed following for the past couple of years, that's for sure. You have Scout in the mid lane, obviously the former Prodigy. And then you bring in Viper here in the bot lane, which just adds a level of upside and a ceiling to this team that they have not had in quite a long time. The amount of individual talent on this team is incredible. The only thing that I struggle with here is who are the team players and who are not. Obviously, you have a lot of players who are very used to being resource heavy. Players like Scout, players like Viper, players like Flandre, who I think have all been relatively resource heavy in the past. It's really going to be up to Clear Love how well this team actually performs. And I haven't even talked about Mako, but obviously Mako, another one of those historic supports. He's been around quite a long time. He's seen success on this EDG roster. It's just whether or not he can continue, or we can continue as EDG to push through. I think you're talking about upgrades in top, to upgrade an AD carry, upgrade it, jungle. Even if you don't think Clear Love is amazing, it's definitely an upgrade in the jungle. I think the floor for this team, hopefully, if you're an EG fan, is playoffs. I have them ranked 7th, so not quite. Well, I think right in the playoffs, because 8 teams make the playoffs. Right at the bottom of the playoffs. I think this team has, like I said with WE, this is another team that I think has the potential to be as high as something like 3 or 4. I really think they have that kind of talent if they can just figure out where they want to put their resources, how they want to play the game, who they want to play through. I think that they have a ton of talent, and when you're talking about teams that really could win on any given day, it's going to be EDG. However, like I said before, one of the biggest things in the LPL is being able to consistently beat up bottom teams, and if this team does not end up figuring it out, I could see them struggling. This is a team that I think could struggle on any given day as well. I think they'll be pretty volatile, but, I don't... I think the talent, you have to recognize how much is here. Important to note that they do have, they brought in a hungry, important Gory in the mid lane. Actually very similar to what Scout did 5 years ago when he came to EDG. But if, for some reason Scout's not performing, you have Gory there who is, I don't want to say a prodigy, but a very highly touted mid lane prospect here. So you have a little bit of cover, you have a little bit of space if your players aren't performing exactly up to expectations, but this roster's too good to not make playoffs. If they don't make playoffs, I'm going to be very, very, very sad. That is going to bring us to one of 2 of the first teams that changed brands this offseason, actually changed their branding up. And that's going to be Rare Atom, of course, formerly Vici Gaming. They were pretty good last year. I think they were right on the cusp. I had them in the playoffs, throughout the entire split, and a lot of people were like, you got to take them out, they don't look good. But they were right there, and I thought they were going to be able to make that push. They were not able to make that push. However, I do think that they have made some considerable upgrades this offseason. Looking at their roster, you've got in the top lane Cube, in the jungle is going to be Leon, mid lane is going to be Fofo, AD carry is going to be iBoy, support Hang. I think you have a ton of good players on this roster. So I don't want to say surprisingly, but I think they did a really good job here. The biggest obvious upgrade that we're talking about is mid lane. You're going from Forge to Fofo. Fofo is, I'll talk about this later. I'm not going to get into what happened at, BLG last year, him and Meteor or any of that stuff. I don't think this is the kind of video for that. If you're interested in it, go look it up on your own time. But Obviously, stuff did not work out there at Bilibili Gaming. He wasn't really able to show his full potential. But when you're talking about players with mechanical skill, Fofo is as hard carry as you get, which I think actually really benefits this team. You're talking about some more experienced players like Leon and iBoy. If we're getting the iBoy that we got in 2018, especially 2017, as opposed to 2020 iBoy, this team actually is going to be a serious playoff contender. I'm not necessarily predicting that to happen, and iBoy's not a bad player even, in 2020. However, I think if you're expecting this team to be a serious playoff contender, you're going to have to get that kind of production out of a player who I think has been slowly on the down curve in the last couple of years. You're bringing back Cube here in the top lane. I thought he was good. He looked good for most of the split. I don't think he was bad. I don't think he was great. I think he's fine. I think adding a more hard carry player like Fofo into the team dynamic is going to be a massive upgrade for him, a massive role downgrade for him. He's not going to have to do as much, not as many games where he's going to have to play as heavy, which I think is going to be as good for him. Like I said, if this team can develop, if they can just keep on the path of getting better players like Leon and Cube, getting better players like iBoy, getting back to where they were, Fofo finally being able to unlock, what we all know he can do, this is absolutely a playoff team. However, all of those things do have to happen for this team to work. As of right now, you're looking at average players in top and jungle. You're looking at a pretty decent mid laner and a pretty decent AD carry, but nothing that's really like breaking the bank. And a support who's just not super experienced. So you really have to be banking on some development from this team in order to place them high. I have them power ranked 9th, which unfortunately for them is right out of playoffs. However, I think playoffs is going to be an incredibly tough race this year. The consensus doesn't have nearly as much faith as I do. They have them 11th. However, I think that this team has a significant amount of upside, and I'm just a big fan of Fofo as a player. So I really hope this team succeeds, and I'd love it. I'd love it if this team was able to sneak into playoffs. Speaking of BLG, let's go ahead and take a look at Bilibili Gaming's 2021 roster. We'll go from top to support here. In the top lane is BB. In the jungle is Meteor. Mid lane is Zeka. I'm not quite sure. AD carry is Aiming, and then support is Mark. Now, again, like I said in the previous one, I'm not going to be talking about whatever drama there was between Meteor and Fofo. I'm not privy to all that information. It definitely affected their play, but I don't know what there was and how much there was. So both players have taken a little bit of a dip. That's probably why Meteor is ranked a little bit lower than you may have expected here. He's ranked 7th for me in jungle power rankings. This guy was unbelievable in 2019. He was one of the best junglers in the region, top 3 for sure, only to have what was objectively a pretty bad 2020. However, I think there's a lot to be excited about if you are a Bilibili Gaming fan, and that most of that comes from their bot lane. They had what can only really be described as a terrible bot lane last year. It just they were not very good. But now you bring in Aiming, you bring in Mark. Aiming's obviously known as a giga carry over in Korea. You bring in Mark, who was just coming off of a World Championship appearance with LGD, where he had a very, very good split, a big reason why that team ended up making it into the World Championships itself. I think this is a massive upgrade. This is immediately, they went from one of the worst bot lanes in the LPL to one of the best, pretty easily speaking. This really could be one of the best bot lanes in the entire world if things click for these two. They do have that kind of talent. You're bringing in BB from Victory 5, who, while I would consider him more of a side grade, and while I consider Zeka, more of a downgrade to Fofo, I think what it does is allow you to play, open up the map a little bit more. I think BB, probably, what was he? One of the most bloodthirsty top laners in the league last year. I think he led the league in solo kills or something like that. I'd have to look it up, but I'm pretty positive he led the league in solo kills just from watching it. A very bloodthirsty top laner, a very aggressive top laner. And then Zeka, has been talked about for forever as this OP rookie, this prodigy. So, if, we have so many of those in the mid lane that you kind of have to prove it at this point before I believe it. But this team has a lot of talent. I've been saying that a lot, but, I have them power ranked as a 10th place team. The consensus has them, quite a bit higher at 8th. The consensus actually has them as a playoff team, whereas I have them as just missing out on the playoffs. But I don't know. This team has a lot of talent. You're really banking on Meteor turning it back around. He was really, really, really good in 2019. He really, really was not in 2020. If you're getting 2019 Meteor, I absolutely believe this could be a playoff team. If you're not getting if you're getting 2020 Meteor, I think this team is going to struggle. I think you're looking at, a top side that's going to die a lot. You don't really have the ability to protect them because you have Giga Hyper carries in the bot lane with aiming, and then Mark, who is a fantastic player. You're going to want to play through that. Zeka's going to have to be able to survive on his own. I think that there is a universe in which this goes wrong for this roster, which is why I have them a little bit lower, and maybe I'm a little bit more pessimistic on this roster, but, just when it comes to talent, especially that bot lane, I think there is a lot to be excited about, and, even if you're just getting rid of the internal drama, just getting things back to square one, I think you can consider that an upgrade for this roster. So, overall, I think Bilibili actually did a really good job. I just hope that the pieces can put it together, and we'll see if they can make a fun playoff run. That brings us to my personal team that I support in the LPL, just for bias reasons. Obviously, I'm not actually biased. I try to be as unbiased as possible as I can in this, but I like to preface the teams that I support. We are talking about LNG Esports, formerly Snake. This roster actually had some really, really good moves in the offseason. Their lineup is looking like Makuya in the top lane, Tarzan in the jungle, Icon in the mid lane, Light at AD carry, and Awandi at support. Now, two major additions right off the bat, jungle and support. We'll talk about jungle first because it is probably the most high-profile early move of the offseason, at least, which was Tarzan coming over here to the LPL, going to LNG. Formerly of Griffin, less I talk about Griffin, the better. One of the most mechanically talented junglers in the entire world. If he can put the pieces together here, I didn't think XX, I'm not really sure how to say his name. I didn't think XX was very good. But, I think if he can put the pieces together, he is an incredible force. And I think it's going to be very difficult for him to stop. I think LPL is an environment that I think really benefits Tarzan. But you're also bringing over Icon from OMG, the longtime mid laner for OMG. Kind of an interesting move. I didn't think Icon was super good last split. However, this is a guy that's been very consistent over quite a long time. He's a good player. I wouldn't consider him an elite player, but he's kind of in that tier of mids that I think is serviceable, good enough to start, which, you worry about if you're looking for a playoff spot, because I think a lot of mid laners are very, very, very good in the LPL right now. But you have Light and Awandi as your bottom lane here. They actually showed really good development over the course of last year, and they have a lot more veteran leadership on the team now. With guys like Tarzan, guys like Icon, especially a lot more experience, a lot more consistency in those roles, I think should help these two along a lot. If they can develop to be one of the better bot lanes, or, if they can develop to be a better bot lane, I should say, in the region, then I think this team's, ranking goes up quite a bit. However, if you are looking for, worries, if you're looking for ways to doubt this team, top and then the bot lane, I think, are definitely the way to look. Light and Awandi definitely have not proven that they are a playoff caliber bot lane yet. But they did show good development, and I think they could possibly get there. They do bring in Makuya in the top lane. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the LDL team he played for. But I know virtually nothing about Makuya. He wasn't on any of the, rosters for like the LDL teams for the LPL teams. So, I've heard really good things about him. He looked pretty good at Demacia Cup. Just, wait and see approach on Makuya. A lot of inexperience here, but also, a decent amount of experience. Bringing in Tarzan, obviously, who's been to Worlds. Bringing in Icon, longtime OMG mid laner. I think it's a good balance. You have a way to train your young players while also looking to be competitive. I have them power ranked 11th. The consensus has them a little bit lower at 12th. I could see them anywhere in the range of like 14 to like 9. I'd be shocked if this was a playoff team. I'm not going to go as high to say as they're a playoff team. I think even if everything goes right, Tarzan's going to look really good, and the rest of the team's probably not going to be able to back him up. But that's just my opinion. Obviously, as a fan, I hope that Makuya develops into one of the best top laners in the region. Light and Awandi continue their development. Icon can get back to where he was, etc. But I'm just not sure I'm going to be willing to predict that for this roster. That brings us to another one of the iconic, historic LPL organizations, and that's going to be, oh my god, OMG here. They let go of a lot of their roster. Their two kind of hyper carries in Curse and Icon are gone. But in are actually two of the more interesting players that I want to talk about. But let's go ahead and go over the roster. In the top lane is going to be New. In the jungle is Aki. In the mid lane is Wooming. AD carry is Eric. And then support is Ba Fang. Now, let's go ahead and talk about where this team could go right. And that is the development of these two really fun, exciting solo laners. New, first, he was really, really good on RNG last year. He showed a lot of really fun things. And I think you're expecting him to continue his development. And the same thing for Wooming, who I have probably a little bit too low at 14, but what a bloodthirsty mid laner. You usually don't see mid laners play that kind of incredibly aggressive style that's usually saved for top laners, but Wooming definitely pulled that out on Rogue Warriors last year and looked really good doing it, honestly. If you're looking up for this OMG roster, New and Wooming are going to be the two players that you are directly looking at as players that could really, really shape how the season for OMG ends up turning out. Outside of that, Aki, Eric, and Ba Fang are incredibly inexperienced. The only player, I saw a stat, the only player on this entire roster that holds more than 1 year of experience is actually Cold, their backup support. So nobody on this roster is experienced. Nobody has a lot of playing time in the LPL, which I think is why I have them ranked quite low. However, development rosters aren't bad, especially when you have talent like this. I'm not super familiar with Aki or Eric. From what I saw from them, I wasn't super impressed from the LDL tape I watched. However, things could really change. I think, like I said, there are some things that could definitely hold this team back, but there are also reasons to be excited. And even if they're not necessarily contenders this year, if you can have someone like New or Wooming break out and then eventually be able to build around them, that's a really good, a really good foundation, I think, to make them solid in the future. As we move on to one of the most entertaining teams in the entire LPL, and that's going to be Rogue Warriors. Now, their lineup from top to support is Ziv in the top lane, Haro in the jungle, Forge in the mid lane, Betty at AD carry, and QQ at support. Now, long time LMS fans will remember Ziv as a top laner formerly of the LMS. Betty, obviously a former AD carry in the LMS. I'm not sure if that synergy even matters. I did want to bring it up, though. I think Ziv's actually an incredibly underrated player. I thought he was super duper good for a long time, and people didn't necessarily give him the credit he deserved. But let's be honest here. There are players. There's Ziv, there's Forge, there's Betty, there's QQ. They don't matter because this is Haro's team, and Haro's team is gonna play like Haro plays. It's probably one of the most entertaining play styles in the entire world. He's probably the most blood-hungry player I have seen in quite a long time. It's just every team he plays on ends up being this incredibly aggressive playstyle team, which is incredibly entertaining to watch, but not always conducive to winning. You're bringing in Forge here in the mid lane. I think this is, personally for me, just not, I think this is a downgrade. I don't think Forge is very good. I thought he did not show a lot of good stuff on VG last year. I'm just not a fan. But, he could prove me wrong, and he could be great in this blood-hungry style. I don't think Betty and Ziv are those kind of players either. Betty, obviously, notoriously much more of a passive AD carry. I think what your hope for is with this team is you have a player like Haro who's going to be playing incredibly aggressive, and you have players like Ziv and Betty and Forge that are going to be a lot more consistent just in case those really aggressive plays by Haro don't end up working out. However, I'm not sure that's always the play style you're going to want to go for, having one player play really aggressive with everyone else being more passive. I'm not sure that's the style that's really going to be working out for this roster, but obviously I could be wrong. I'm just personally not super high on the combination of players here. I do think they're all really talented. Betty, I think, has been in a slow decline for a little while now. I think a lot of people are going to be angry that I have him as low as 14, but he just has not looked good over the past year or so, and so I'm not really willing to put him higher than that. But just play style-wise, I'm not super happy with how this team meshes together. On the bright side, they are going to be incredibly entertaining. They're going to be just like every Haro team ever, which means they're going to end up randomly taking games off of top Esports and LGD Gaming, and then, losing games to, TT and eStar and the worst teams in the league. So I have no idea what this team's going to be. I don't think they're going to be consistent at all, which is why I have them quite low. But, there's a chance they figure it all out. Haro with that driving force, obviously the more consistent stuff out of Ziv and Betty. I think it could work. I'm just not going to predict that it's going to work. I think this is probably going to be a very fun team that ends up crashing and burning. That brings us to our final 2 teams here, the first of which is going to be eStar Gaming. Now, eStar, of course, a new team last year, that 17th team into the league, actually surprised a ton of people when they ended up finishing 5th and making playoffs in the spring split. Everything collapsed on them in summer. They crashed back down to earth with probably a little bit more of what we expected. But their roster going into 2021 is looking like Zeus in the top lane, Hacker in the jungle, Insulator in the mid lane, Rat at AD carry, and then Shousey at support. I think that there is good talent on this roster. I don't think it's quite consistent. This is essentially the same eStar team we saw last year with the addition of Hacker, Zeus, and Insulator. It's the same bot lane. And while I think Shousey is a little bit underrated as a player, he had a super good spring, I think Rat is not very good. I have him personally power ranked as the dead last AD carry in the LPL. And that's not to say he's a terrible player, just I think he did not look good for most of summer. Personally, just did not like what I saw out of him. You're bringing in 2 LDL solo laners here in Zeus and Insulator, both of whom I think are going to be expected to be near the bottom of their roles as well. This team is really going to be up to Hacker to make plays work. And Hacker has shown that he's been a pretty solid player in the LPL in the past. Nothing groundbreaking, but a decent player in the past. And then you have, of course, Shousey, who, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he was rookie of the split in the spring. But I could be wrong about that. I don't see a lot of upside for this team. The upside for this team is if those 2 solo laners can develop into something really, really good. A lot of inexperience here. Insulator and Zeus obviously have no experience. Rat has barely any experience. Shousey has barely any experience. Hacker is a little bit more experienced, but just I don't see where this team ends up coming together. I don't see who you play through. I don't see how you win games more specifically. This team just doesn't have a very good identity. I think that would be the best way I could describe it. Is it just lacks a clear way for them to be able to play the game, a clear pathway for them to push through. And that's a big thing in, especially professional League of Legends, is having an idea of where you can win games. And I'm not super clear or sold onto where that's going to be for this roster. I think there's pieces. I'm not super high on any of them. I would be really surprised if this team made it out of the bottom, 3 or 4. However, of course, eStar surprised us last year, so they absolutely could do it again. I'm not going to predict that. I would expect this team to be near the bottom of the standings for the entirety of the year. And that brings us to our final team here, the second rebrand that we have here, formerly Dominus Esports. It's now ThunderTalk Gaming, TT. I'm not sure which one it is, ThunderTalk or TT. I don't really want to call them TT for obvious reasons, so I'm going to call them ThunderTalk throughout the review here, but that's that. Their lineup in the top lane is Chilizi, in the jungle is Xiao Peng, in the mid lane's Captain, AD carry is Samdi, and support is Teen. They actually did a really good job of upgrading this Dominus roster. You bring in guys like Captain, you bring in Samdi. I think there's a lot of exciting pieces here. I think, let's talk about the good ones first. So obviously Samdi was the AD carry for that Victory 5 team that surprised everybody in summer. He's a lot more of that facilitating, that more passive AD carry style that, someone like Ghost showed off to a great extent at the World Championships. Just not something you would be super excited on as a lower tier team, because that style only really works if you have other players that can carry. Luckily for them, they do go ahead and bring in Captain from that IG Young LDL team that won the 2020 championship. And there's a lot of hype surrounding Captain, and I'm on the train. I've watched quite a bit of Captain film in preparation for this video, as I have on every single one of these players, obviously. But I watched quite a bit of Captain film because I just found myself getting dragged down the rabbit hole. And he's an incredibly fun mid laner to watch. I'm very excited to see how that works out. I actually really like the combination of him and Sam D here. I'm just a little bit more concerned about the rest of the roster. Chilizi in the top lane is especially concerning. He has not looked good on VG in 2019 or 2020. I have him ranked as the worst top laner in the league. I would be very surprised if that changes. He seems like a guy who just gets replaced by Summer. I think you have a lot more positivity around players like Xiao Peng and Teen, who just aren't as experienced, but I definitely think that they you know, there's a lot going for them. This is one roster that I think if it's given time to develop, if this is a roster I could see making playoffs in summer. I don't think they're going to make playoffs in spring. Don't get me wrong. I think that this team is going to struggle in spring. They're going to try and figure out what works and what doesn't. But if Captain progresses, if Sam Deeg progresses, if Zhao Peng progresses, I actually think that there is quite a bit of hope for this team moving forward. A lot of promise that as long as they can get it rolling, I think that, you know, it's going to be a hard snowball to stop. I don't have them dead last. I have eStar dead last. But I actually think the ceiling for this team is a lot higher. I'm not sure if that's necessarily a spring ceiling. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. These players are not ready yet. But, you know, to say that there is no hope for this roster, I think just is not true. And I actually really like the direction that they're taking. That is going to conclude all 17 LPL teams. I tried to do this in a reasonable fashion, but it looks like it's going to be just over an hour or just around an hour, which is an incredibly long video. If you made it this far, thank you so much. And honestly, if you made it this far in an hour-long video, you have to hit the like button now. I've taken up an hour of your life. You owe it to me now to hit that like button. We're going to be together forever. Anyways, up on the screen now is going to be the power rankings for the teams as well as the consensus. That's going to be up on the screen now. I'm going to give that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, and then that's gone. And then up on the screen now is going to be my power rankings of all the different positions, top jungle, mid, AD carry, and support. Go ahead and pause at any point while those two are up on the screen if you want to talk about that in the comment section below. If there's any other videos you guys would like me to make, go ahead and let me know down below. I'm going to be making preseason prediction videos for all 4 of the major regions as well as NA Academy because those are the ones that I know. Other than that, though, I really appreciate and enjoy you guys being here. I hope you all are having a wonderful day and have a wonderful day, and I will see you all later.